In what sense is our society male-dominated?
The fact that the vast majority of wealth is owned by men, the vast majority of capital is owned by men. Women do more unpaid labour.
A very tiny proportion of men, and a huge proportion of people who are seriously disaffected are men. Most people in prison are men. Most people who are on the street are men. Most victims of violent crime are men. Most people who commit suicide are men. Most people who die in wars are men. People who do worse in school are men. It's like, where's the dominance here precisely? What you're doing is you're taking a tiny substrata of hyper-successful men and using that to represent the entire structure of Western society. There's nothing about that that's vaguely appropriate.
Who is biased and who is unbiased? Who has logic and who doesn't? And who is wrong and who is right? Yes, we already know the answer. Feminism, that was first introduced at the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848 in the United States, was first regarded as political, cultural, or economic movement aiming for establishing equal rights and legal protection for women who suffered from domestic violence, unequal pay, suffrage, sexual harassment, and violence over decades, experiencing inequality of human rights. Well, to clarify, the motive and reason for the early feminism movement was justifiable and unproblematic until it has been altered to radical feminism, which claims a man-dominated patriarchal society oppressing women with authority still prevails, calling the man or sexist and latent assailant, arousing the gender inequality. Radical feminism is especially being issued in Korea and US as they are attempting to transform this society advantageous to women through enacting iniquitous laws that is now causing reverse discrimination, gender conflicts, and violation of man's rights. Considering how radical feminists propagates the man-hate and leading not just feminists but also normal women to become hostile to man and society through media, the current radical feminism must be eradicated in our society. Today, gender conflict provoked by radical feminists in Korea have reached its peak. So, what exactly is causing two genders to fight? Yes, legislation of gender quota system is one powerful answer. It is aimed for fixing the gender imbalance in workplaces to ensure the female participation in political assemblies, decision-making positions in public, and economic life. What those radical feminists in Korea are asserting is that male-dominated society is discriminating the woman in terms of employment and promotion, so the proportion of female workers and executives within the companies must be allocated. This is completely wrong and nonsense. The asymmetric gender proportion exists in every type of occupation, depending on the type of work the job is requiring. Since man and woman are biologically different, they have different fields they're inherently good at. For example, according to a sociological study taken in 2018 by Michael Holmes, men tend to do better in running businesses and leading people. In contrast, women biologically do better in engaging and communicating with children, which results in higher proportion of female school teachers. Recently, Korean government has designated the female proportion of bureaucrats and executives in public institutions to be 10% and 20% by 2022, and radical feminists are still outcrying to increase the woman proportion in high social and economic positions. What they're doing is extremely contradictory and hypocritical, since then what about jobs like servicemen, plumbers, and deliverymen? In other words, they're just taking a tiny section of job to support their claim of remaining male-dominated hierarchy. Moreover, the way how radical feminists stimulates man-hate through framing the whole Korean man as they're always the offenders and women are victims is a severe problem. The extremely heated gender conflict in Korea currently is rooted from the Seochodong public toilet murder case. To shortly summarize a full account, a lunatic who had a woman hate killed a woman in a toilet in Seochodong, Seoul. He was a psychopath who felt like he always has been victimized by women in his life. Yes, it is definitely a tragic incident. However, the issue was that the radical feminists started saying that she died just because she was a woman. And misogyny by man exists in our society, generalizing all Korean men disdain women through media and protests, brainwashing the young woman. As a result, many young women initiated having paranoia and different point of view, which is in any time they can be victims by men. Well, as everyone knows, this is completely wrong. Like the word radical implies, radical feminists are extremists who do not even try to listen to the other side, but just whining and insisting that this murder case is because of misogyny prevailing in our society, while all the profilers say it's not. Yes, it is an undeniable fact that sexual assault victims are mostly the woman and rapists are mostly the man. Every 68 seconds, Americans are sexually assaulted and 90% of adult victims are women. What radical feminists in US argues using this data is that it's because of patriarchal power that is remaining in our society. Calling out the patriarchy is responsible for that asymmetry and is claiming all men have potent to rape and sexually assault women because radical feminism believes patriarchal society exists. It is critical to distinguish those part of man from all men, just like normal Americans do not regard all Muslims as terrorists, since according to their logic, all Muslims are latent to become terrorists because most modern terrors are done by Muslims, which is completely wrong and making no sense at all. Whenever an ideology or a political theory gains a word radical, that is already something wrong and biased. What radical feminists do in these days only seems like they're attempting to revenge on men's past patriarchal attitude on women, not establishment for equal rights of women. Provoking gender conflicts and unfair affirmative action is causing a reverse discrimination that now resents man. Thus, to really seek for gender equality, both genders must cooperate to discover the way that both genders could peacefully harmonize and live together.